When she was in the birthing process, there was a point in time when she thought she was constipated and she dropped me in the porcelain king. Kerplunk. I mean, that's how I was born. That's how I came into the world, in a cold white bowl. My name is Edwin Depner. Hear my story. In 1982, my biological mom was pregnant, and she was schizophrenic, and my father was bipolar. And they met in a psych ward, and they had a one-night stand, and my biological mom wasn't aware that she was pregnant. Paramedics found me. Someone called 911. I don't really know the details on that part, but I was cyanotic and I was hypothermic. And when I was in the ER, the thermometers and such wasn't able to read the temperature of what I was. So I was blue and probably looked like a dead baby at that point. I was in the hospital for what I understand about a week. And at that week, they released me into my foster family, who was supposedly taking care of me until the mother lost her husband. And then she slipped into depression. And so that comes in Stan and Nancy, who I always call them my parents. I don't think of them as anything less than. And you know, the doctors gave very explicit instructions of like, look, he may not make it past 12 years of age. He'll always most likely not walk. Extremely delayed was their outcome and their thought process on what was gonna be my life. And my parents did everything they could within their power and within their ability to get me into everything. So in the 80s, it was probably like speech therapy, play therapy. It was, I remember all kinds of strange things that I did. Balancing on boards, juggling bean bags, throwing things, coloring small squares and little tiny dots until I broke pencils and freaked out. Just going through that process all the way through like kindergarten. I just remember being pulled out of class a lot, always being the last kid at the desk, freaking out, being very frustrated, struggling through everything. And I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder and with dyslexia. The dyslexia diagnosis had stuff to do with like syntax, like grammar, spelling, the written part. There was just a huge disconnect between sentence structures, formation, that kind of thing was just awful. Some math as well, number flipping, like disassociate from like 14 to 41, or I would just lose, numbers would drop off, letters would drop off. I'd see silhouettes of words. I would always ask questions to teachers, sometimes to adults. Sometimes I would get made fun of, or I would get maligned or told that I was stupid or incapable. You know, you should just learn a trade, move a shovel. A lot of stuff like that was told. So when I graduated the high school, I actually had the IEP, and the IEP allowed it to be extended. I didn't actually graduate high school until I believe I was 21. I did that for financial reasons and to get accommodations through things. It allowed me to run through programs. I worked in a few restaurants throughout the Seattle area. I did that, but I was getting burned out. I was working, 80, 90 hours a week. I was running the back end of the restaurant in an old chef brigade system, and it's hard and it's tiring and exhausting. I found that I enjoyed the front of the house more than the back of the house. I enjoyed working with people and getting to know people and being extroverted and being outgoing. And as I grew up and worked in that, I started noticing that I worked with a lot of the people who are going through a lot of hard stuff. A lot of people in the culinary world are either dealing with drug addiction or different issues like that. And I'd listen to people and I would work with them and I would just hear them out. When I went to college, I would come across as well-spoken in these classes, and then I would write a paper. I even had a teacher once finish about a quarter way through the paper being like, if I keep grading this, I'm gonna run out of red ink. So yeah, you failed. And that was the end of the comment on the paper. And I was like, oh, good. And I'd never worked on a paper like that before. I'd never done a thesis statement. I'd never really felt what it felt like to process and go through all of that and then have it edited and then go through drafts and work that way. Just that never occurred to me. So that whole semester I failed hard, failed well. And I struggled a lot through that. But I didn't really think that it would matter. I didn't care because I figured I would just go up there for whatever semester they kick me out and I fail, I learned something, whatever, I'll go back and figure it out, right? And one of the individuals at the school approached me and said, like, you know, I've never really seen anyone work this hard, and I know where your situation is, and I want to give you a check for next year, the tuition, and I want you to try again. It was a slow, arduous, painful process. You know, F's turned into D's, D's turned into C's, C's turned into B's, and then some B's turned into A's. So when I graduated from Briarcrest, when I got my bachelor's degree, I met my wife there, and my wife and I were figuring out where we were going to go when we got married. We decided to go back down to Seattle. We got an apartment, we made it down there. I'm managing 200 doors as an apartment manager, and I'm working as an intern at this church. And the church had a situation that occurred that caused the church to implode. And it made me really question a lot of things. And so my wife and I decided that we needed a break from this. And so we decided to sell all our belongings. We packed up our Subaru that we specifically purchased to go on this trip. And we took a year sabbatical. We lived out of our car and we just traveled. We mostly went through Canada and the coast, each side of it. And after that year, we landed in New York City, and we had decided that we were going to stay in New York City. And then from that point, I started struggling with, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I met Dr. Chip Roper, who runs the Vocation Center. And I worked with him for a little while in some other areas, and I took a test called the Highlands Ability Battery. And I went through this 3.5-hour battery, and it was hard, and I hated it, really hated it. And I took it home and I said, hey honey, you should check this out. What do you think about me becoming a therapist? She actually kind of rolled her eyes at me and she was like, well, yeah, no duh. And I was like, oh. And she's like, yeah, you'd be perfect at that. And I was like, oh, okay. As if she didn't already know. So she did. So I looked at schools, and within a short period of time, I was accepted to a master's program. Again, I struggled. I went through that. I mean, that was probably one of the hardest things I think I'd ever done. I never thought that I would go back to school. I never thought I was going to go back and do that to myself again. But again, it was this bittersweet situation where I loved it and hated it at the same time. So I went through the school and I started studying, and I did well. There was a few classes that I thought were going to end me. Statistics, I thought for sure was going to end me. You know, the state board exams, like the clinical hours and internship. And I was able to graduate. I graduated on time. I graduated with a much higher GPA than I ever thought. I think it was like a 3.77. That's hard and unimaginative to me. I just never thought that that would be the case, or that I'd be sitting here telling you that. And then after that, you know, I passed the state board. I was able to get fully licensed, and now I'm launching a practice. And helping other people and being called as a therapist or working in the therapeutic value is a key piece to, I think, why I'm here, what I'm doing. I always wanted to be that for who I was when I was little. Oftentimes lots of people helped me, but no one explained to me or organized for me what it was that I really was doing. And that was hard. And I hope to be able to be that change in the world in a little bit more of a different way, or to just help people along in their journey. If you're someone that struggles with neurodivergency or learning disability, letting people in, having a support system, a network to allow people to help you through the difficulty and the struggle. Asking for help, advocating for help, being tutored, working with a coach, a therapist, will be difficult. It will be hard, but it will improve you. It won't feel well while you're doing it. But it will be worth it. Keep struggling.